peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
Viewers, good morning. This morning, I want to address the issue of Uhuru Kenyatta's legacy. The legacy of His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta of Kenya keeps on moving, keeps on going forward and forward. Since the handshake in 2018, that brought about the peace, the tranquility, the unity of purpose, President Uhuru's star has been rising. All over Africa, people are thinking of using the model that Kenya used to stop any form of violence, chaos on the streets after elections. As you know, all of you are aware that elections in Africa produce two things: after or before or after the voting. Disputed elections, winner takes it all, loser doesn't accept the results. But the Kenyan model takes us miles and miles away from the normal type of democracy. The democracy, a negotiated format, a consensus format. A democracy that gives consensus a chance. A democracy that talks about the future of a country, the unity of a country, as opposed to a fragmented country, polarized country, where most African countries find themselves in. We have seen in the last 10 years or so, most of the elections in Africa have been contested by the opposition. Very few people in Africa, countries in Africa, where opposition has conceded defeat and come up to congratulate the winner. We have seen the South African model has worked very well. The Ghanaian model has worked so well. I don't see any other country in Africa where the models have worked well. I thought it would be Sierra Leone, but today we see Sierra Leone going back to the same ethnic tensions, as you can see from the reports that are circulating in the international media and the local media. So elections in Africa are contentious issues. They create a contentious position, create a departing point for the people of Africa, of that particular nation. The legacy of Uhuru Kenyatta, therefore, will be remembered for having brought the tranquility that we have today, the peace, the new format, the new tool of having a better organized civil Africa, an Africa without violence, an Africa without chaos after elections, when the opposition accepts to work for the interests of a nation, not personal interests. This has worked in Kenya, and thank you very much, Your Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta, for the tenacity and the steadfastness that you have guided this handshake up to today. For those who want to mutilate the handshake, belittle the handshake. One lesson they should learn is to look at Libya. Libya was once a territory we all respected. It is no more. Let's keep the handshake and the legacy of President Uhuru Kenyatta. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us today, the 26th of February 2020. It is about 14 minutes past 11 a.m. here in Nairobi. Thank you so much, wherever you're watching us from today. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on which part of the world you are situated. And I'm glad that you found time to be with us this morning. Dr. Matanga is not here with me, but he shall be with us later on in the afternoon. So in the first hour of the show, Good Morning Africa, we will look at, the news making headlines here in Kenya. And then at the top of the hour, that is when we shall come back with Diaspora Dispatches, where we shall be looking at other news making stories across Africa, and we have so much in store for you, but that is for later. But for right now, my name is Miriam Bugutu. So let's just go through what's making headlines this morning here in Kenya. And we do that through looking at the major newspapers here. And also as we continue to hold President Uhuru Kenyatta accountable, the promises that he made for Kenya, his Big Four agenda. What are some of the things that he's doing, and how far is he in regards to meeting some of the things that Kenyans are expecting, from his government, and what are some of the things that is improving, and what are some of the things that he requires to improve in order for Kenyans to enjoy the service delivery, or to get what they're supposed to be getting from their government, who is headed by President Uhuru Kenyatta. So he has his work cut out for him, even as he continues to serve his last term, that is about two and a half years, I think, remaining there for President Uhuru Kenyatta. So he has no time to waste, and he has no time for politicking, and we've been seeing that. He means business, but we need also to be up to date for what really he's doing, and if at all President Kenyatta is living up to his Big Four agenda. So I will be taking us through some of the things that perhaps are evident that he's doing, or some of the things that President Uhuru Kenyatta needs to improve on. Thank you so much, because as a citizen, I think if my government is winning, I am winning, and if my government is not doing very well, then we have a problem, and we have to speak up, right? I think every African, we have that responsibility, wherever we are in our different countries. If you don't speak up, that is when evil gets a part, and we keep complaining. No, we should speak up, and at the same time, if we have suggestions for better solutions, and our governments really care for what we have to say, because they serve us, and sometimes we know what is ailing us better, and we could recommend solutions that could benefit and find benefit, and also find solutions for our own problems. So it is important, because according to our Kenyan constitution, the citizen of this country, the constitution gave them so much power, and so we need to engage. It's only that Kenyans have not realized the part in which they have to play for this country to move forward. We have the responsibility to engage in the building of this country, to demand for the kind of services we want, to demand for the kind of leadership we want, to vote for the kind of leadership we want, and to change whatever it is that we have to change, because even the Constitution, gives us the power to even recall the leaders who we think are not serving us well. And so we have so much power because the Constitution vests so much power in us. It's only that we have not realized that. So I think we have a responsibility as a citizenry of any country that we come from to speak up and to make sure that our voice is heard very loud and clear. If you don't like something, you don't like it, and please say so. And maybe that is the only way we can find a change. And change can come indeed, not just in Kenya, but across Africa. Let's stop being passive citizens, as if something that is happening in your government does not affect you. If insecurity is bad as it is right now in Nigeria, and Nigerians are quiet because Boko Haram has been killing people now for a very long time, and they feel like they're living in another part of the country that perhaps is not very affected, and you sit there very passive, you have to speak up and call on some action from the people who are responsible to bring you security. So we have that responsibility to speak, and we have to make sure that the people that we speak to, our leaders that we elected to serve us, must be hearing what we're saying. And if they're not able to hear what you're saying and jump into action, then we don't need them there to lead us. And so this morning, let's just take President Uhuru Kenyatta to some work and look at his Big Four agenda. What is it that is happening in there? And we see on the front pages of the Kenyan newspaper this morning, very interesting there. Remember, Ledama Olekina was, I think, arrested yesterday, and I see he was arrested over ethnic incitement, and I think that was a very good move from the DCI, because we don't need people coming in and sowing seeds of hatred and ethnic bigotry that later on some Kenyans take very seriously and literally and end up harming other Kenyans. That is not what we need in this country, in the spirit of unity and cohesiveness. That goes against everything that our forefathers fought for us to have the country that we have today. And so on page 8 of the Star newspaper, why are you always angry? Ledama blames Ruto for his arrest. I don't know why he would blame Ruto for his arrest, because whatever he said, and it was public knowledge out there in public. And so he should take responsibility and perhaps, perhaps apologize. And if at all he didn't mean that, and if he meant what he said, that we have a problem, because this is a whole senator. So let's just read that story, which is very short, here on page 8 of the Star newspaper. Now, Narok Senator Ledama Olekina was yesterday morning arrested over hate speech and ethnic contempt. Officials from the National Cohesion and Integration Commission and the Directorate of Criminal Investigations took him to Kilimani Police Station. The senator was, however, released later in the day. NCIC Chairperson Samuel Kobia said in a statement that Kina was arrested following his utterances on February 19th on JKL Live, which airs on Citizen TV. During the interview, the senator said the Building Bridges Initiative rally in Narok will be about the Ma community, that is the Maasai community, and he said that Maasai issues will be better articulated by Maasais, and I'm not going to apologize for that. So he's not apologetic there, and he's convinced that he did not do anything that was wrong. But if you watched that interview, they were not very good. And being that he's a leader in this country, he should be mindful of anything that he says that might cause some public tension. It's not very good. And so thank you so much. I see. Just keep writing, and I shall come back to your comments in a very short while. As I said there, I'll just take us through the news-making headlines in Kenya as we look at the newspapers and also a bit of what President Uhuru Kenyatta is doing. And then at the top of the hour, we'll just jump right to diaspora dispatches, and I'll bring you the latest in Africa. So don't worry. Don't, why perhaps you're not looking at that right now, but we shall come to that in a very short bit. And so Still on the front pages of the Standard newspaper this morning, Uhuru power deal ends a Sonko era. And this is a story that we shall do later on in the afternoon, but I'll just read a bit of that. And embattled, Nairobi Governor surrenders running of the city to the national government in a sweetheart State House deal that raises serious questions. Sweetheart State House deal. That's a very interesting choice of words there by the Standard newspaper. The story is on page 8 and 9, and it's very we didn't see that coming. And so I'll look at that story. Like I said there later in the afternoon, we shall have a show on a current affairs show on Kenya's story. So I'll just leave that there, and I'll get into the details much later. But just in a nutshell, a governor without portfolio. This now leaves him in a governor without portfolio. It has not taken us by surprise because there have been many problems in Nairobi. That is the Council of Governors Chairman Wycliffe of Paranya. That was his reaction. And also the reaction of Makueni Senator Mutula Kilonzo Jr. Will the Assembly oversight the National Executive? I doubt. Will the functions revert? I doubt. Will the Assembly budget for the assigned functions? Unlikely. Will we include them in county revenue allocation? Serious constitutional issues. So he's raising serious matters there when it comes to the Constitution in regards to this deal that was signed by Nairobi Governor Mike Sonko and State House. President Uhuru Kenyatta there. And as I said earlier, we shall not get into the details of that right now. We shall have a whole hour to look at that and among other issues. So I'll just leave that alone. And still on front pages there of the Standard newspaper, a 10 Kenya shillings trillion economy with this 46 million poor people. Statistics suggest that Kenya's economy is soaring, but the numbers do not add up to the ground where an overwhelming majority of citizens are classified as poor and vulnerable. That is a story on page 2 and 3 of the Standard newspaper. And they're saying 14.4 million Kenyans, the number of the Kenyans who work as casuals, and then 100,000 Kenya shillings is what 95% of salaried Kenyans take home, because 95% of salaried Kenyans take home less than 100,000 Kenya shillings a month, and 4 is the number of Kenyans out of every 10 who are able to put food on the table every day. I think these are very important statistics that the government absolutely must take seriously, and perhaps help in even as the President Uhuru Kenyatta looks at his Big Four agenda. You need to know that Kenyans have food on the table. It's very important. A very hungry nation is not very good, and so that is a challenge, I think, to President Uhuru Kenyatta, who now, looking at these numbers, might see that he has a lot of work to do, and Kenyans are expecting that those numbers to be looked at, and the government now can see what it can do in terms of those statistics that some are not very good there. And it is a problem that not just in Kenya, a lot of African countries are grappling with the high number of unemployment, and of course the GDP, and a number of people who are even able to put food on the table. As we know right now in Zimbabwe, a lot of people there are even dying of hunger, and a huge population of the country now just relies on aid food, which is a very sad situation. A country that was once a breadbasket in Africa. Every time I look at Zimbabwe's story, it's very sad. As an African, it's very sad, and I'm just hoping that and praying that there should be better days ahead for Zimbabwe and indeed other African countries that are going through tough times right now. So on the front pages of the Daily Nation, beginning of the end for wild Sonko era. Now the writing has been on the wall for months, and the last one to decipher the inevitable stroke of the sword is Mike Sonko, swathed in designer get-ups, bedecked in gold bling. In the end, he has been forced to surrender most of his authority to the national government. They're just trying in a nutshell to say we have a very flamboyant governor over here. I think he's in love with brands like Versace. He would wear it from head to toe, even have a haircut, with the Versace brand, so he's quite flamboyant, and he's made a few errors, and as the front pages, this headline suggests the beginning of the end for Wild Sonko era, and so that is our governor here. And as I said there earlier, that this is a story that we shall be looking at later on in the afternoon as we look at the current affairs in Kenya, and we shall focus on that story. So I will not get too much into that. Cosmos Ejikeme. All right. We shall talk about Biafra in a very half an hour from now. We shall be talking about Biafra. So just keep me company as we wait. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate. And all right. And also, still the story of Sonko there, and we see SGR employed 6,000 Chinese. Oh well, that is something that should be looked at as millions of jobless and hopeless Kenyans continue to tarmac. That is something that should be looked at and see how can they correct that. And Cabinet Secretaries answers SMEs queries. In a commendable display of private-public partnership, 8 ministers took to the hot seats at the SMEs conference to tackle issues affecting the sector. That is on page 10 and 11 of the Daily Nation newspaper. And then also the story of DP Ruto's guard who was manning his office that day that those foreigners together with Rashida Chesa allegedly went to visit, who was found the initial statements was like was he committed suicide, but a lot of stories have come up after that, and so the police, especially the DCI, is investigating the matter. And the page 6 of was guard at Ruto's office, a marked man. Okay, I think for our viewers who have been following this story, you could be interested to know the development. So let me just read for you a few of that. And so what's alleged, that's what a caption here by the Daily Nation, and it continues to say the genesis of the problem. Now, according to a confidant, Mr. Kenei had developed a close relationship with DP William Ruto and even ran errands to his Sugoi home. This seems to have angered some of the men close to the DP, who started making Mr. Kenei's work difficult. Due to the fallout, Mr. Kenei sought the help of a cabinet secretary close to DP to get a transfer, but he was told to stay. Mr. Kenei's father is said to have asked the DP to follow up on the grounds of the close relationships they had. Now, see, I told you, it's just a new twists and turns in this story. And several months before his death, Police Sergeant Kipyegon Kenei had fallen out with some of Deputy President William Ruto's close associates. The nation has learned. So bad was the situation that he had even contemplated seeking a transfer from Harambee House Annex. This is one of the angles that investigators are pursuing as they seek to find out who killed the officer, a key cog in unlocking the 39 billion Kenya shillings fake arms scandal. A post-mortem on his body, which was scheduled to take place on Monday, failed due to the unavailability of government pathologist Dr. Johansen Odur. It is expected to be conducted this morning today, and police sources told the Daily Nation yesterday that it was Mr. Kenei who received a former sports cabinet secretary Rashida Chesa and his company into the DP's second floor office on the day they were arrested. Now, in the process, one of the DP secretaries wondered how Mr. Chesa had gained access to the office. Detectives believe Mr. Kenei was acting on the instructions of a high-ranking official. Following Mr. Chesa's arrest, the tensions between Mr. Kenei and some of the DP's operatives are split over into the public. Very, very interesting. It's such a long story, but I will not read the whole of it. If you really wanting to find out, then go to page 6 and 7 of the Daily Nation there, the Kenyan newspaper, the Daily Nation there. So that is just about it with the headlines. We will not go too much into the details of that. As I said, I'll come back later and we shall look at that. Even as we continue to look at that, remember the other time President Uhuru Kenyatta had a meeting with the German's president, Mr. Steimer, who was visiting this country, and they were able to put a foundation stone at the German Technical and Vocational Educational Training Initiative at Kiambu. That is the Technical and Vocational Education Training at Kiambu Institute of Science and Technology. So that I think will go a long way. And there's a lot of things that Kenya will actually borrow can actually borrow from Germany. Germany is just one of the countries that is very stable, you can tell. And the leadership of Germany has always been a non-allied, leadership. That you can't really find them in the middle of this mess going around the world. And so their manufacturing industry there is very, very good. And their industries there, their small industries, the manufacturing industries especially, because it has a lot of support by the government. And because President Uhuru Kenyatta, one of his big four agendas is manufacturing hubs, he can borrow a lot of things from Germany, and even their education sector, which I think Kenya tries to borrow a bit of that from, except ours is not to that full extent. Remember, now we are in the process actually of getting into have a new curriculum from primary school now, and now it has changed, but to a certain class. So the ones who are still doing the older curriculum are finishing it, but the new curriculum was officially introduced last year, and this year it was fully implemented. So now, the education system in Germany is when you reach grade 4, the teachers are able to access. If you're book smart, then you will continue to the next stage with your education. If you're not, and you're skilled in other ways, then they'll take you the technical way. There's specific high schools or institutions that will go that your skills will be able to be enhanced, and you'll be able to do something that you really are gifted and talented in. If you're not, and you're not either of that, there's always a place for everybody in the education system of in Germany there. And Kenya, I see the curriculum based whatever we have right now that has been introduced, it borrows a bit from the German's education system, not fully, because the structures there in Germany really, really work, and they have been there for a very long time. So the education system there is very good, but they make sure every child is placed where they are good. And if you're good in arts or science or anything, you at a very early stage, after grade 4, you're able to go. You're able to be put in a school or an institution where you can fully, actualize your potential, and you can do what you're really, really talented and gifted in. And if you're gifted in, like I said, in just going to school and scoring good marks, then you shall continue to the next stages, and your teacher gets to determine that. I don't know if we can, if that system could be replicated, say here in Kenya or just someplace else in Africa. And we usually have these teachers who just, for no good reason at all, they just don't like you, or you just don't get along very well. I don't know how many kids will actually make it, or a lot of their dreams will just be killed, by some of these teachers. But, they have a social contract, as a doctor would like to put it. And so it's easy to implement some of these things. The teacher is the one who assesses the student and decides you're fit to go this way, or you're fit to go the other way, or you're fit to face the other side. But it's really working. And so it has a very good education system there. So that is also something that President Uhuru Kenyatta could borrow, even education in line with the new curriculum that his government introduced, and is just in the process of being fully implemented. It is something that he could borrow and see how is it working for Germany. What are some of the structures in place? How do they go about it? And this could perhaps we could help us better our own education system, because Germany is a very good blueprint in terms of a lot of things. And also, like I said, in manufacturing, I mean, if you're not driving a German car, you're not considered to be driving at all, for some people, because they make the best. And even it's just other sectors, anything that is made in Germany, forget football made in Germany, but anything that is made in Germany, it's good quality. The first things that comes to your mind is the good quality, good technology. So we could borrow a lot in the manufacturing industry and see how can we enhance our own manufacturing industry. I know the small scale manufacturers are really the backbone of this economy, and perhaps it is time the government paid a lot of attention to this sector that is really the bulk of the manufacturing industry. We call them the Juakali sector, and see how can the government support these SMEs. How can they, because a lot of them, some people have not even gone to school very well, but they were gifted, and they're able to be good masons. They're able to be good welders. They're able to they do a good job regardless of their level of education. So if they sometimes wants to go to the bank to get a loan to expand their business, sometimes it's not very easy because of the bureaucracy and formalities that can be a bit complicated for such people. So how can now the government make it easier for these people to at the same time be able to access loans or just subsidies that will better them? And in terms of even taxes, how can it be made in a manner that they are taxed but does not hurt their small businesses, but also allows them room to grow and become much better and become much stronger and employ more people, because the Jokali sector or the small scale manufacturing industry, the lower tail, they have employed a lot of people, and it could be one of the areas that could be used to solve a lot of joblessness in this country, because you don't require a lot. All you need is to go learn, and a lot of things are just practical. You just go learn. It doesn't require a lot of theory related stuff, and so the government should encourage more, even as we encourage more children to go to school. It is important. I think in this day and age, it is important to have a lot of young people go through the education process. At least if you can't even go further, just get the basic education. And nowadays the basic education is not just the primary education. You have to go up to high school, at least for you to get a better grasp of what is understanding, what is happening around you and around the world. You really need to have that level of understanding. And so after that, you can go and do any technical course. So just do whatever you want, but at that point you'll be safe. And then if you really want to go further, then go get a college degree. But that is not to say after you get that, now you cannot go and work in the Jokali sector, because we've seen people who work there who finished school, have their own degrees, have their own PhDs, they're well educated, but they're no jobs. So that thing of sitting and waiting for the government to create jobs, I think those days are over. They were over 30 years ago. There are no jobs that are available, even for the huge market of graduates that leave the school learning institutions every year. And in Kenya, there has been a lot of institutions higher learning institutions coming up, and so a lot of Kenyans are really getting higher learning education. And so when they come out, you realize there's so many people who are graduating every year, and so the job market keeps shrinking by the day. And so just sitting down and hoping, that you'll see a job advertisement somewhere and then you'll go apply. The chances of you getting that job is very, very slim. And we've seen it when, say, a hotel has just come up and they advertised for a job. You see the number of people who show up there. People who, majority of them are even overqualified, and you look at the queues that goes very far to no end. That tells you the level of of desperation that the young people have, even as they go through the education system, with the reality that chances are they might never get a job, and if they do, they might never get a job that they really really want. So now what could be the solution of this? So the manufacturing industry, the agriculture industry, that is something. I know also the big four agenda, that healthcare is there, but I think you need to be a doctor for you to work there. But the other industries which really don't need to qualify like that for you to really get involved, you just need a bit of information. Nowadays, farming has become something that a lot of young people are taking very very seriously, because initially a few years ago, farming was just left to the old people there in the village. I mean, there was nothing good about farming except the food that comes from there, which is delicious. But outside of that, it is not something that really attracted a lot of young people. That is a couple of years ago. But now we see a lot of youth here in Kenya coming out, and they're the ones who are rearing poultry. They're the ones who have huge, greenhouses with vegetables and fruits. They're the ones who are looking for markets outside the country. So there should be a system that really supports these young people who want to make something out of themselves with the education and the diplomas and the degrees and the certificates they've gotten from all these institutions. That learning, that education, and that level of understanding, if they bring it in the agriculture business, and they really want to do agriculture on a very serious note, it will be very helpful. If somebody went and learned about marketing, it will be very helpful if they started their own business, and they will know, how do I approach such a retail chain store if I want them to be stocking my produce, or if I want them to be to partner with me and this and that. So it is very important. Education is very important, but we should not just get educated and then for the sake of going out and look for a job. We should get educated so that we have the information that might help us, not just in the work in the corporate work area, but also in other areas in our lives, and also can really jolt us into thinking and coming out with creative ideas in how we can make an employment for our own selves. So this is not just a challenge to the Kenyan young people, but also the youth across Africa, because we know we have the biggest number of unemployment. I'm not saying America does not have its own problems, or trust me, they have bigger problems. Have you seen the level of homelessness in the streets there in New York or in other parts of in America? So the problem is global. Of course, African problems are always magnified to 10 times more, 100 times more. And so we have to then, our leaderships across this continent must start looking at ways to encourage younger people to go out there and make employment for themselves and create employment, and make sure that they don't live in despair and hopelessness that we've seen a lot of young people do. And so at the end of the day, that is what really drives them into joining these extremist groups. When you hear the stories of some of the young people who have repented or who are former members of these groups, they're able to be lured because of the hopelessness, because of the lack of jobs, because of the lack of feeling like the governments are not listening and are not addressing their problems. So these are things that are very important, and President Uhuru Kenyatta and his government must really create an environment that young people can thrive, that the funds that are meant to go to the young people, please, can they go to the young people? Can it benefit the people who are supposed to be benefiting? We've seen those affirmative funds, for the youth fund, for the women fund, where you can create a group for a few young people. I don't know what is the maximum minimum. And then you can go and, apply for a loan to start a small business, and then you give it. I've heard a few people have gotten it, but of course, corruption came and have messed up a lot of these very worthy initiatives. But these are things that could change the lives of young people in Kenya, and indeed also across the world, if the leadership of in Africa would be thinking from that process, and so to solve the unemployment and also to support our manufacturing industry, the young people must be considered. And I saw during that peace signing deal, even in South Sudan, some young people came out and said, well, we have like 550 members of parliament. Can we have at least 75 of them young people there, because they understand in this table full of older men, we need some people who actually can represent our needs and who can articulate our needs better. So if we have more younger people in those tables, then we for sure can have some change that is needed. If we have more young people in manufacturing, if we have more young people in agriculture who come in with fresh ideas, who come in with an understanding of better technology on how to increase your production, I think it's a beautiful thing, and that can spur growth. I wish the government, and this is my appeal to President Uhuru Kenyatta, I wish more attention was paid to the younger people and the skill and they bring to the table and the skill they bring to the country, and how this, if properly enhanced, can really change the dynamics of businesses or the business sector, the manufacturing sector, the agriculture sector in the country. Can we create an enabling environment? Of course, politics is very important, because if the country is not politically stable, then that is a problem. But as it is in Kenya right now, we are enjoying some relatively peaceful times, and so people are able to go on about their lives, do businesses and all that, which is okay. Forget about the few politicians who are just trying to raise the temperatures here in the country, but then Kenyans are not able to focus on the things that are really important to them. But I think these are things that are really important to Kenyans, that if really properly addressed, then the lives of Kenyans, especially the youth, who are the majority of the people right now who are suffering and who live in despair and hopelessness. I think this can go to change their lives, can go a long way in changing their lives. So this is something that must be considered, even as President Uhuru Kenyatta works to beat the deadline and also works to make sure that he leaves a legacy in this country. If he can really invest in the young people in this country, Mr. President, if you really you can invest in the young people in this country. And when you look at the bigger picture of Big Four agenda, make sure the youth have the center stage in this, and they're empowered, and an enabling environment is created, and then you will be shocked how much potential is in this country and how much input the young people can, and this can really change the dynamics in this country for the better. So, Mr. President, please, young people, I'm sure would be happy if some things were done differently. So also in health, the government has tendered for a construction of about 300 bed a private hospital at Kenyatta National Hospital, and preparations for procurement of transaction advices are underway for 3 teaching and referral hospitals. I think this is important, especially for the referral hospitals, because some Kenyans have to travel so far from across the country to come to the few referrals hospitals we have. We have Kenyatta National Hospital and also Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital over there in Eldoret. So because they're the ones who really, there's some illnesses where you have to travel all the way. So Kenyans sometimes are not able to travel. They don't have that money. They don't. And something is very, a disease doesn't wait. That is an emergency. So we've seen a lot of Kenyans even lose their lives who cannot travel all the way to Eldoret or all the way to the capital city, Nairobi, to seek for a specific, treatment. And so by building and increasing these referrals, I think it will go a long way in improving, access to very important, medical services in our public sector, because we know that, private institutions are quite expensive, and not very few Kenyans can afford to actually access this quality healthcare there. So by increasing this number of referral hospitals, this I think will go a long way in ensuring that Kenyans get a good treatment and are not able to travel. Wherever these referral hospitals will be situated will serve a huge number of Kenyans, and Kenyans will go, of course, to to benefit from all of that. So we have been looking at, for the past a few days, because these politicians are the people who have been walking around, who have been given the mandate to go sensitize the public about BBI. We have come to the conclusion that some of them have not been doing a good job. And also what has been very apparent and very obvious in these meetings is they've turned, a lot of times this seems to have turned into a political rally, which is not right. And so now I've been doing a public service here, trying to educate Kenyans. So whether this thing comes and we're able to vote for a referendum, yes or no. So before it comes, it is important for us to understand what is in this thing. So by the time it comes for us to vote in a referendum, you will know. By the time you're going to vote yes, you know what you're voting for. If you're going to vote no, you know why you're not voting for, and you have the information and you have what you need to know. So since then, they've not been doing their job, so I've taken it upon myself to be taking us through chapters by chapters wherever I can. So today we shall look at chapter 5 of the BBI draft, the BBI draft that was published last week on Wednesday in all the 3 leading dailies. That was on the 19th of February. So we've looked at chapter 1, 2, 3, I think 4 we looked at the other day. And now let's look at just chapter 5, and then I'll be finishing with that, and then we'll take a very short break. Then we shall come back with our diaspora dispatches and look at other news making headlines across Africa. So this is my public service, all right? So the task force, that is chapter 5, divisive elections. So the task force recommends a system that addresses our unique needs, especially in forging a homegrown or autochthonous system for shaping executive power and representation, an autochthonous national... What is that word? Oh my goodness, that is such a huge word. How are Kenyans going to understand this? Please, use English. By English, I say layman's language, which people can understand. I'll be forced to go Google that word. I don't know what that is. So an autochthonous national executive structure, listening to Kenyans across the country and hearing their views, reveals that they want a homegrown system and features inclusion in the executive, while also wanting to directly vote for their president. They also told the task force that they want a strong opposition and a parliament that will hold the executive accountable. Very important. Also, that kind of system has the following characteristics. That system that I really cannot spell up there, all right? So that kind of system has the following characteristics. And so running for and winning the presidency. Now, the president shall be elected through universal suffrage. For a candidate to be declared the winner of the presidential election, he or she must win 50% plus 1 of the presidential votes and at least 25% of the votes cast of more than half of the counties, as it is now the case. Of course, that is how it is in our constitution. And also an executive president. The president will remain the head of state and government and commander-in-chief. He or she shall be the central symbol of national unity. The president will chair the cabinet, which comprises the deputy president, the prime minister, and the cabinet ministers. So this prime ministership, it appears it is something that is here with us. It is not going anywhere. And so we see the president will remain the head of state and government and the commander-in-chief as it is right now in our constitution, and he or she will be the central symbol of national unity as it is now in our constitution, and the president will chair the cabinet, which comprises the deputy president, the prime minister, and cabinet ministers. Okay, that will change. And because that will change, that is now why we have to go to a referendum. And the executive, under the authority of the president, shall have the power to determine the policy of the government in general. And while the ministers, under the leadership of the prime minister, so the ministers will be under the leadership of the prime minister, shall be collectively responsible in the National Assembly for the execution of the affairs of the government. I think that is what happens in the United Kingdom, if I'm not very wrong. And then D, the term limit. Retain the present term limit for the position of the president. Yes, please. 2 terms, and then you're gone. 2 terms and we're done. So that still remains like that, and I think that has helped in making this country stable. So we shall continue to have that. Oh, it's a long one. I did not think it will be this long. I don't know if you'll be able to do all of it, but even if it remains a few points we can cover tomorrow, let me just do two more and then we can take a short break. And then Deputy President. Now, the Deputy President is the running mate to the President. The Deputy President shall deputize the President. But what we have right now is like Deputy President has his own powers because you're supposed to deputize the President. And, our Deputy President, William Ruto, is a very ambitious man and he's a politician. And so it is expected. But when you look at countries, say, like the US, you see, you hardly hear of who is the deputy president there in the US. I'm even forgetting his name because he's not always in the media like that. And I don't think President Trump would even accommodate somebody like that because he wants to be the only person in the limelight. So usually you work as a deputy president, you deputize your boss, who is the president. You have to sort of toe the line. That is why you were his deputy president. But when it appears as what we have today in the country, like we have two different centers of power there at the executive, then it's very interesting that you can see they're always at loggerheads. The president is saying this, his deputy comes out the next day says this, and so there has been a disunity in terms of President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy William Ruto. I'm not saying because you're a deputy you cannot have your opinion, but usually in the standard practice in the world, usually you are the deputy, and so you deputize. You don't butt heads with your head, which is the president. That is the standard, across the world. That is what usually happens. And so a Prime Minister, within a set number of days following the summoning of Parliament after an election, the President shall appoint as Prime Minister an elected member of the National Assembly from a political party having a majority of members in the National Assembly, or if no political party has a majority, one who appears to have the support of a majority of MPs. So that is very interesting. And these are things that Kenyans need to understand that are contained in the BBI report. And I think one of the newspapers there was saying that now our opposition party, ODM, now wants an executive prime minister. So we cannot have an executive prime minister and an executive president. One has to be executive, the other one has to be sort of take a passive role. We cannot have that powers. We cannot have two set of strong powers in the country. There will be a tug of war. And so the proposal here on the BBI report is to have a prime minister within a set of number of days following the summoning of Parliament after an election. The President shall appoint. So the Prime Minister will be appointed by the President. So if the President is the one who has appointed you, there's no way you're going to be an executive Prime Minister. And then an elected member of the National Assembly from a political party having a majority of members in the National Assembly. So this Prime Minister will be elected from a Parliament, perhaps if his party has the majority, and or if no political party has a majority, one who appears to have the support of a majority of MPs. Okay, now that is when corruption will come in. Have you heard the way our members of parliament vote? They go, there have been reports during such even bills or during vote that is needed in parliament. They're usually very busy in the washrooms here. That is where the bribes are received and are given. And so I don't know if I could trust them, but that is what happens in South Africa. So I might need to just develop just a bit of faith in our politicians, especially our members of parliament here. I might learn to just have a bit of faith, in that institution called a parliament here in this country. But from the past, it hasn't been an interesting story coming from there. So I want to thank you so much. It is just a minute or so to the top of the hour. So I'd like for us to take a very short break. And then when I return, we shall look at African news making headlines. Of course, Hosni Mubarak died yesterday. I think some of us might know much about him. Others may not know. Don't worry. I'll fill us all in. And also some new stories from Malawi. Now the president has formed a coalition. And also I think in Somalia, somebody, the leader who, led during the Lamu attacks in January, I think was murdered. That is according to the US. And also we have some news from Nigeria, as usual, from South Sudan, and also from Burkina Faso and other countries across this continent. So don't go too far. I'll be back with Diaspora Dispatches.
Peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
We discuss Africa. We see what ails Africa. And today, this afternoon, we want to see whether Sudan will permanently remain a sick child of Africa. Is it a permanent sickness? Can we resolve the issues of Southern Sudan? Is it something that has gone wrong for 200 years? There has always been a problem in Southern Sudan, in that great region, starting from all the way the Alimadi Wars and the rest of all what happened until today. Peace seems to be elusive. Why has UN taken slow action? Why hasn't UN set up a tribunal? We want to see a tribunal that will make sure that Southern Sudan people are accountable. Those who committed crimes against the human beings. 20,000 Sudanese perished. They are perished. They are not accountable. Nobody can account for them. And we cannot sit here, go on hammering peace agreements without mechanisms of accountability. If we set a tribunal for Sierra Leone, for Rwanda, for Camera Rouge, we need somebody to stand up for the poor masses, the masses that have died, the masses that continue to die, the masses that are being brutalized, murdered, maimed on a daily basis by marauding armies of both Riek Machar and Salva Kiir. There must be an accountability. You are not going to sit here and tell people there is no accountability in Southern Sudan. There must be a tribunal Why do we run to harass countries of Kenya? Put ICC on Kenya, put ICC on this country, put ICC on Central African Republic. Why have we delayed on putting a tribunal for Southern Sudan to find out who is killing, who has been killing, how they have been killing people? Let me speak for the people in Southern Sudan, the women, the children who have not gone to school, the children who have no medicine, the children who have nothing, who have been running since 2013, and the war cannot end because of two people. Let them face the tribunal. I'm not going to keep quiet as a Pan-African to see Southern Sudan being maimed, being tortured, being cut, dismembered, and we keep quiet and watch people vote images of people, of malcontents singing to us in Uganda, in Kenya, in Ethiopia, in South Africa, telling us they have money. Let them face the international tribunal and tell the tribunal who gave them the guns, where they buying them, how they were killing people. Enough of is enough. Enough is enough for Africa. We have had enough. There is no need of that anymore. Enough is enough. And if people have died, they will not cry. We people who are left on planet Earth must cry for them. We must find justice for them. We must make sure that there are leaders who go on bragging on television stations all over the world, who are accountable. They must be behind bars.
Good afternoon if you're watching me from East Africa. Good afternoon if you're watching me from the upper part of Africa, the Middle East. Good morning if you're watching me from West Africa, South Africa. Thank you so much. And if you're watching me from Europe, and it is an evening if you're watching me from the other side of the world, and thank you so much. And if you're watching me from the US, I think it's a good morning and you're just waking up. Thank you. Thank you for joining me. First part of the show, that is the first show we had. Just a while ago, we were looking at the local newsmaking stories here in Kenya, and especially we went through the newsmaking headlines in the leading Kenyan newspapers, and we're done with that. So now we are about the business of Africa and see what else is making headlines across the continent, and what else do we need to talk about, and why do we even need to talk about it. So thank you so much. I see one of our viewers there. I think there was a typo, and they are correcting it, or yes, they will correct it, or they are correcting it. It is Burkina Faso and then Biafra. Biafra is Biafra. We understand, so we apologize for that. Mr. Okoji times 3, right? All right, but thank you so much for watching this morning. And so, all right, keep writing to me wherever you're watching us from. I always go through all your comments, because that is how me and you get to interact. That is how I get to hear you and see what is it, whatever it is that we're discussing here, and the news that I'm bringing to you. If I told you, what are your thoughts in it? That is what makes the show successful, when you participate, both of us interact. All right, so keep writing, and while you do that, please let me know where you're watching us from. It's always a pleasure, and so thank you so much. So what I will do, I'll just read a few of the newsmaking headlines across Africa, and then we shall look at a few of them in detail. So we'll start with Egypt, of course. And now, the former Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak, ousted by the military in 2011, died in Cairo at the age of 91. Mubarak spent 3 decades in office before a popular uprising swept Egypt. He was found guilty of complicity in the killing of protesters during the revolution. That conviction was overturned and was freed in March 2017. And we go to Burundi, where all parties to the case challenging the election of East African Legislative Assembly Speaker Martin Goga in 2017 finished their final submissions, and the appellate division of the East African Court of Justice is expected to rule on the matter on a date to be announced later. Burundi, through its Attorney General's office, is challenging the election of Mr. Ngoga Rwandan on grounds of that East African Legislative Assembly rules of procedures were violated. Now, the parties to the case are Burundi, who are the plaintiffs, the East African Community Secretary General, who are the respondent, and East Africa Legislative Assembly Legistar Fred Mbide, who is the intervener. And also, Burundi is also challenging an earlier decision by the East African Court of Justice's first instance division to dismiss the case, saying the lower court committed procedural irregularities. We move to Malawi, where Malawi's ruling Democratic Progressive Party DPP and the opposition United Democratic Front UDF formed an electoral alliance yesterday ahead of elections in May. Observers say the goal is to achieve more than 50% of the total votes required for the winner. The action is taken a day after Parliament set May 19th as the date for fresh presidential elections, and after a Constitutional Court nullified last May's ballot results, which incumbent Peter Mutharika narrowly won. In his short speech during a signing ceremony in the capital Lilongwe, Mutharika said the partnership comes because both parties hold similar values. Mutharika said the two parties are also considering joining a coalition. And we go to Somalia, where the U.S. military now says a senior Al-Shabaab leader behind the deadly January 5th attack on the Manda Bay base in Kenya was killed in precision airstrikes along with his wife. In a statement, the military says the targeted individuals were identified as members of Al-Shabaab. The statement did not name the senior Al-Shabaab leader killed in the strike, but says he was in charge of planning and directing terrorist operations along the Kenya border region, including the Manda Bay attack. We move to Guinea-Bissau, where now Guinea-Bissau's National Electoral Commission is to recount the votes from the second round of presidential election that took place on December 29th. The commission will today convene permanent and non-permanent members of the National Electoral Commission, as well as the representatives of President-elect Umaro Sissoco Embolo and Domingos Simões Pereira. Now, the electoral body said Mr. Embalo had won 54% of the votes against Mr. Pereira, who had won 46%. A state-run Guinea-Bissau news agency said the recount is meant to comply with the Supreme Court ruling that has raised uncertainty about the president-elect swearing in on February 27th. The Electoral Commission had previously said that it had exhausted its authority in the matter of the electoral process, adding that there was nothing else it could do. I don't know what is wrong with our electoral commissions in this country. I understand in this continent. I understand sometimes they have they're influenced a lot, especially by the politicians, and in most instances by the government. But they keep messing up the elections in Africa, and they set our countries, to a tipping point. So now look at what happened in Guinea-Bissau, and we shall talk about this once I'm done reading the rest of the news. And we go to Algeria, where the Algerian health minister has confirmed the country's first case of coronavirus in an announcement on state-owned ENTV on Tuesday evening. The minister, Abdelrahman Ben Bouzid, said the patient is an Italian man who arrived in the country on 17th of February. A Reuters news agency reports that the patient has been placed in isolation. Algeria becomes the second African country with a confirmed case of coronavirus after Egypt. And we go to Burkina Faso, where police in Burkina Faso say 4 people have been killed in an ambush on a police patrol in the north of the country. 3 of the dead were police officers. Another 5 people were injured. Monday's attack happened on the Pisilag-Iba axis of the San Matega province in central north region, northeast of Burkina Faso. Last Tuesday, 3 soldiers were killed in a region near the Mali border, thanks to Boko Haram. And we go to Nigeria, where the Inspector General of Police, Mohammed Adamu, on Tuesday said apart from inadequate personnel, the Nigerian police force needed not fewer than 1,000 armored personnel carriers and 250,000 assault rifles with corresponding ammunition. Adamu, who disclosed this at a public hearing organized by the House of Representatives Committee on Police Affairs, tagged repositioning the Nigerian police for an enhanced service delivery, said the country needed 2 million tear gas canisters and smoke grenades. What? Other equipment, the AIG said the force required, including 200,000 riot gunners and smoke pistols. All right, 1,000 trafficking devices and 774 operational drones, among others. He also lamented that the poor remuneration scared best and suitable applicants away from the police. Okay, and we go to some news from Biafra, and the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, Mr. Nnamdi Kanu, has called on the United States Department of State and the international community to rise up and stop atrocities against non-Muslims in Nigeria. Niger News reports that the IPOB leader made his call on on Twitter in reaction to the continued detention of Leah Sharibu by a terrorist group, Boko Haram, since her abduction 2 years ago. On February 19, 2018, 110 schoolgirls aged between 11 to 19 years old were kidnapped by Boko Haram, a terrorist group from the government's Girls Science and Technical College in Dabchi, location in Bulabulin, and Yunusari local government area of Yobe State, northern Nigeria. While other schoolgirls were released, Leah Sharibu, a Christian schoolgirl aged 14 at the age of her capture, is the only remaining Dabachi schoolgirl still held hostage. And we go to Ethiopia, and the country will release from jail 63 opposition activists and other high-ranking government critics by the end of the week. A spokesman for the Attorney General's office has said news agency AFP has reported. The decision has been taken for this national good, and investigations against them have been dropped. Zinabu Tubu was quoted as saying, "I don't know. Mr. Abiy Ahmed seems to be really doing a lot to appease a lot of people, but all his efforts seems to be hitting a slug, as we've seen a lot of agitation coming from Ethiopia, and perhaps soon we should just have some show just dedicated to what is really happening there in Ethiopia." Just the other day, a grenade attack happened at a rally where Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed was supposed to have attended, but he was not present there, and a few people were injured. I think, and also somebody must have died. That was on Sunday. So, and we've seen people agitate to even for autonomy there in Ethiopia. So we need to talk about Ethiopia. Soon we'll have a show especially for that, and we shall look at what's really happening in Ethiopia. We go to Guinea, and Guinea's electoral authorities were on Monday warned by the International Association of French-Speaking Countries, which shared concerns over the credibility of the electoral register in the country's upcoming polls. The warning from the international organization La Francophonie came 6 days before. Is it Lee or La? It is La Francophonie, right? It came 6 days before elections condemned by the opposition as a ploy by President Alpha Conde to stay in office. The OIF said the register included nearly 2.49 million problematic names, and problematic is in quotes, including duplicate names and people who were too young to vote or individuals who had died. Of the 2.49 million, 98% do not have documents to enable their identification, said the OIF. Now you see, we shall talk about that story because it's quite perhaps what happens in a lot of our African countries. And I keep saying, our electoral commissions in Africa, they really contribute hugely in the messes that we find ourselves when we go to elections. Because now look at that. Over 2.4 million people. Some are either dead and the name is still in the register. Others have not even attained the age to vote, and they're waiting to vote. Others, they don't even have identification, any sort of identification, but they will vote. That is in Guinea. is it? All right, and don't forget, President Alpha Conde has mutilated wants to change the constitution. You know what? We'll talk about that in a very short while. Let's now go to South Sudan, and the wife of South Sudan's newly sworn-in Vice President Riek Machar says he feels he is a prisoner. Miss Angelina Tenney told the BBC that restrictions put in place by the regional body, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, on her husband's travel within and outside South Sudan was still in place. Now, the restrictions were intended to stop the fighting and get Mr. Machar to negotiate a peace deal. They also restrained him from speaking to the public or media. IGAD's Special Envoy for South Sudan, Mr. Ismail Weiss, said the restrictions elapsed when Mr. Machar took up his new role in the new unity government on Saturdays. But Mrs. Tenney said Mr. Machar's group had not received official communication to that effect. As she said, they were concerned that he cannot fulfill his duties. I think now, because on this matter of South Sudan, let's just talk about it and just move along. And that is the latest, by the way. Just a few minutes, about 22 minutes past 12 here in Nairobi. In case you're joining us, a very good afternoon or good morning or good evening, depending on where you're watching us across the world. So this matter of South Sudan, of course, there had been some sanctions that were put across some leading politicians and members of South Sudan. But Mr. Riek Machar had very special sanctions imposed on him when he was what I call under house arrest in Khartoum. This was to restrict his movement because remember, first he had gone to South Africa for treatment, I think, and then sanctions. He was put under house arrest for quite a while, and then he was transported back to Khartoum. And this was, in order to contain him. And so they made sure that for the peace process to hold, then we might make sure that we get a hold of Mr. Riek Machar. We have him stay put in one place so that we're able to communicate and just get in touch with him and make sure he's part of the process as much as possible. And that has been going on for the last couple of years. And so now, after he was sworn in back again for the third time as the first vice president of South Sudan, and so now they feel that the restrictions, because according to the restrictions that were imposed by IGAD, Mr. Riek Machar was not supposed to go to any IGAD country or leave Khartoum for that matter. Remember, he was situated in Khartoum, but now I assume he's in Juba and he's there to stay. He better be, because you need the implementation of this peace process. So Mr. Riek Machar, right? So he's now been sworn in as the first vice president of South Sudan. So I would think now he has to, for him to function really fully as the vice president of this country, I'm sure that this ban should be lifted now for him. But for those other members who still have sanctions, especially from the US and from the US especially, they need to monitor that first. But for Riek Machar, I think it's important for IGAD to lift these sanctions so that Mr. Riek Machar is able to operate fully on his capacity as the first vice president of the Republic of South Sudan. He signed the peace deal. I think that should have broken, the sanctions, and I think right now they should let him. He should not be walking around like a man who is still a prisoner, as the wife says here. But we've seen IGAD's Special Envoy for South Sudan come out, Mr. Ismail, and say, oh no, he's free after signing up. After signing the peace deal and now the implementation of the unity government that they did last Saturday, I think that was offered him now some freedom, and that was lifted up, automatically. But I think that was not communicated to Riek Machar's office. So now Riek Machar needs to move freely, and as the first vice president of South Sudan. The five of them. I don't know if the fifth one already has taken the oath of office. Not yet. I've not read it anywhere. But four of them. Yes, South Sudan has so many vice presidents. So four of them were sworn in on Saturday together with Riek Machar, but he is the first vice president. So I don't know if he has more powers compared to the other number 2, 3, and 4 vice presidents, and 5. I'm not sure, but he seems to be the leading vice president there in South Sudan. So because of his position, because of his who he is now and in South Sudan and the role that he has in that government, I think that these sanctions by IGAD needs to be lifted, and Riek Machar now should be left to function as a normal vice president of a country. He should be able to visit any IGAD country on his official capacity as the vice president of South Sudan. And so, yes, I'm in support. These sanctions needs to be lifted so that Riek Machar can properly execute his responsibilities and duties as the vice president of South Sudan. Having said that, though, we still need some monitoring, because I'm sure there were enough good reasons for IGAD to have decided to put him under those sanctions there in Khartoum, so that to restrict his movement. There's something they might have seen, or judging from the history, or the threats that existed then, I think are not there anymore. I'm not sure if they're there, but I believe that with Mr. Machar signing this peace deal last Saturday, and of course they were forced by the international community, and them coming together, I hope that now they can start really, really internalizing this process and realize, as much as we were coerced to come together, as much as we found a few things that were difficult for us to come together and were really keeping us apart, and the fighting really affected our country, but still I think we can own this process and try to really help our country move forward and spearhead a renewal of South Sudan, and just the new beginnings of South Sudan through his working partnership with President Salva Kiir. Together, I think if they will just focus on what is important in that country, South Sudan has the potential to do well and to pick up and really stabilize as soon as possible. So yes, I'm in support of sanctions being lifted by IGAD on Riek Machar, because by signing that peace deal, he showed some goodwill. I want to believe they were genuine, or it was genuine. All right, I want to believe the goodwill was genuine by him coming and signing and coming to the table and signing. I want to believe he meant that he was ready to forget the past and just move forward. I want to believe it meant that now he was willing and able and ready to come back as a vice president of the country of South Sudan and to serve the people of South Sudan. And so I don't think the restrictions will help anything. If anything, they will just that will be a cloud that will be looming around him. And indeed, the way the wife says here, he still feels like a prisoner. I think he should be made feel comfortable. He should be accorded the respect that comes with the office that he holds there in South Sudan. Despite of that, that crazy time they put the people of South Sudan, it is a new beginning. So let's just give peace and hope and love a chance. So lift those sanctions, IGAD, and the travel restrictions that you have placed on Riek Machar, but still have one eye very open and just monitor this peace process and how they're implementing it. Watch what they're doing there, him and President Salva Kiir. Egypt, of course, lost Mr. Hosni Mubarak yesterday. I think it was the leading news yesterday, and we had the breaking news when we were having our afternoon shows here. And of course, Egyptian state media reports that Hosni Mubarak died at the age of 91. Now, former President Mubarak ruled Egypt for 3 decades, 30 good years. Oh, only in Africa. 30 good years. After being forced from office during the protests that engulfed parts of the Arab world in 2011, he was tried and found guilty of complicity in the killing of protesters during the uprising. So I'm just trying to explain for those of us who might not know much about Hosni Mubarak, and why it's important for us to talk about him and how he shaped, especially Egypt, having been a president of a country for 30 years, like the way Museveni has been the president of Uganda. This year, I think, will be 34 years. That's a lot of things that have gone down. It's such a long time. And so just a look back at his own history. Hosni Mubarak was a military man, but one who upheld his country's commitment to international peace. Under his leadership, Egypt took a role in trying to broker deal between Israel and the Palestinians, and his 3 decades in power came to an end in 2011 when a popular uprising forced him from office. And now he faced criticism of using a state of emergency to crack down on political opponents, and the final years of his life was spent battling charges of corruption. Mubarak was born on 4th of May 1928 in northern Egypt, and also despite a poor background, he graduated from Egyptian's military academy in 1949. He transferred to the Air Force, and where he was commissioned in 1950. He spent 2 years flying Spitfires and became a flight instructor. He witnessed General Gamal Abdel Nasser's of course, military coup that happened in 1952 and the Suez conflict which followed. In 1959, Mr. Mubarak traveled to the Soviet Union, a major arms supply to the new Egyptian government, where he learned to fly bombers. And he apparently spoke very good Russian. And despite the fact that he actually studied in Russia and speaks very good Russia, he was keen to have alliances with the West, not Russia. So that made his government's relationship with Russia a bit frosty. All right, maybe because he studied there and he knew much about Russia. Perhaps, he had better understanding why. So he was an ally in the Arab world to the EU and the US and the Western world. Of course, he married his wife then, who was 17 years old, and he worked his way steadily up the ranks, becoming head of the Air Force Academy and then Air Force Chief of Staff in 1972. President Anwar Sadat made him a vice president, and in October 1981, soldiers sympathetic to there's a conflict that had happened in Camp David. I don't want to get into the details of that, and it appears as President Anwar Sadat had not handled that very well. That involved, I think, the Palestinians and Israelis, and he was pro bringing peace between these two countries, but Anwar Sadat did not handle that very well, and so that caused some division even in the army. So the soldiers who were sympathetic to one side of the group that did not agree with some decisions President Anwar Sadat had made at that time, assassinated Sadat during a parade commemorating his victory in the 1978 Arab-Israeli conflict. So if you want to know how this happened, so the assassins hid in a truck which stopped opposite the president. Thinking they were part of the parade, he stepped out forward to salute them. And while he tried to do that, that is when President Anwar Sadat was assassinated, was killed. They threw grenades and fired indiscriminately in the crowd with AK-47 rifles, which are manufactured in Russia, by the way. And Sadat died in hospital 2 hours later. Hosni Mubarak was among the injured. Mubarak succeeded to the presidency, receiving 98% of the vote in a national referendum in which he was the only candidate. Clearly, democracy had not arrived in Egypt. How do you even get 98% of the votes and you're the only candidate? Who are these 2%? Or those are spoiled votes? Because he was the only candidate. All right. So Egypt has come a very long way. And when you see the current president, Al-Sisi, trying to take it steps much back farther than, Africa, we have to speak up, and Egyptians must really get worried. And so he expanded the internal state security forces and survived at least 6 attempts on his life, sustaining injuries from a knife-wielding assassin in Port Said. And in January 2011, Egypt erupted. There were weeks of demonstrations by protesters frustrated by poverty, corruption, unemployment, and autocratic rule. His promise not to contest the forthcoming presidential elections was not enough. After 18 days of protest, he bowed out to the inevitable and announced he was stepping down. Now, just 4 months later, a now ailing Mubarak was ordered to stand trial, lying on a hospital bed. We cannot forget those images that we were seeing broadcasted across the world. He faced charges of corruption and the premeditated murders of protesters. His defense team initially claimed that he was legally still president of Egypt and therefore not subject to the court. And in June 2012, Mubarak was sentenced to life imprisonment for failing to prevent the killings of protesters but cleared of other charges. charges. The decision triggered a series of protests in the streets of Cairo, and 6 months later, the sentence was overturned and a retrial ordered. He was placed under house arrest at a military hospital in Cairo. And in a succession judgment, Mubarak was cleared of corruption charges but convicted of embezzlement. And in 2017, Egypt's highest court finally acquitted him of responsibility for the deaths of protesters, and he was released. So Hosni Mubarak lacked, of course, the flamboyance of his immediate predecessors. That was Nasser, who was the first president of Egypt, followed by Sadat, but vowed that he would continue to serve Egypt until his last breath, which he did. So that is just a very short history of Mr. Hosni Mubarak, who was the third president of Egypt who came to power after assassination of Anwar Sadat. A bit of some history lesson there. So now let's just get on with the other news making headlines across Africa, and of course Malawi now. We see some President Peter Mutharika joining in a coalition with the opposition United Democratic Front to try to form a strong party or a strong coalition who will take on the opposition and see that he wins. Of course, the new date of election has been set to May 19th. This is after the elections of last year, which, by the way, happened on May 21st, were nullified earlier this month, even after President Mutharika had been sworn into office and was serving his second term last year, just after the elections, and so they were nullified. So now the elections have been set closely a year after the other elections happened. So this guy has just been receiving, salary for what? Is that even legal, really? Mr. Mutharika has been receiving salary as the president of Malawi for the last year, and he was not duly elected. So, of course, the elections are set to happen on the 19th, and we shall be following for you this story as we did last year, and we shall be bringing you the latest there from Malawi. So now let's go to Guinea-Bissau, another problematic elections there. Malawi, not Malawi, but Guinea-Bissau. Malawi there, the Electoral Commission was in serious problems. And we see also now in Guinea-Bissau, the Guinea-Bissau's National Electoral Commission is to recount the votes for the second round of the presidential election that took place on the 29th of December. Remember, Malawians went to elections, I think, in October, and then there was no clear winner. So the sitting president then, I think, became number 3. So number 1 and 2, the first leading candidates who had served at some point in his government, are the ones who, one was the vice president, I think, and both of them had served, had been prime ministers in that country for a certain period in time. So the first two went to a runoff, and now it appears as though President-elect Umaro Sikoso Embalo win is being challenged, because after they went back for a re-election on 29th of December after the October elections, Mr. Embalo led by 54% of the votes, and Pereira came second with 46% of the votes. But now, after Pereira went to court and challenged the validity and in the manner in which these elections were done, which he said were not free and fair, and there were a lot of irregularities. Now, court ordered for a recount of all these ballots. I hope they kept them very well, the ballot papers and the electoral materials there. And so there's the court ordered for a recount of the votes, and so it's supposed to happen before the president-elect is sworn in on 27th of February, which is when? Today is the 26th, if I'm not wrong. It's supposed to be tomorrow. When are they going to count these things? Is the swearing in really going to happen? And what if they rule against it? Why do they wait for a very long time? Electoral commissions in Africa bring these countries to chaos. This is a ruling that was made a few days ago. I think, in January, I believe. So since then, the Electoral Commission has not taken it upon itself to go and make sure that they honor one of the directives that was given by the court, and that is to recount the votes. So the swearing in is supposed to be taking place tomorrow. So I'm assuming if they started counting that yesterday and today, and the swearing in is tomorrow, what if they count and then they realize actually Mr. Pereira had a case and his claims were valid, and they realize that President-elect Mr. Embalo did not really did not garner the 54% of votes, and there was some vote stealing and rigging and irregularities that happened. So now what will happen? Electoral commissions in Africa have to realize the important role they play when it comes to the future of the country, because it's not just elections. If you don't get it right, it could plunge a country into serious chaos, and then that will cause a lot of instability, and that will affect every other aspect of the lives in that country. So elections must be done right. And we've seen Malawi, which even the Electoral Commission was taken to court, and they enjoyed with themselves with President Peter Mutharika. And they're still waiting there to conduct another elections on the 19th of May. And I've always asked on this show, why are they still there? Why have they still been allowed to sit there and start planning to run another election, another mock of an election that might still have other issues after that? I don't think I would trust them. I don't think if I was a candidate in that election, I would trust the same people who botched the other election and hope they will do a good job this time around. I don't think they will do that. And we see this is the same problem with the Guinea-Bissau's electoral, but they've come out and they've said the Electoral Commission had previously said that it had exhausted its authority in the matter of the electoral process, adding there was nothing else it could do. If you had done your job, you had only one job. If you had done it the first time the right way, people from Guinea would not be having this problem, would not be facing this dilemma again, would not have to go and now wait. Tomorrow, the president-elect is supposed to be being sworn in, but he cannot be sworn in because I don't know if Electoral Commission would have announced, the proper, results there, and I don't know if they announce it will be accepted by others, or they will, I don't know. So that is, they're setting that country to serious troubles. I have some news from Biafra, but just bear with me. I want to look at another news from that was Guinea-Bissau. So now let's look at this other Guinea. This Guineas in Africa seems to be in a lot of problems. And guess what? Because of the leadership over there. So now we're having another president from Guinea whose name is Alpha Conde, whose term is supposed to be ending this year. But this president has decided that he's not going home, but instead he's going to have a constitutional coup. When you change a constitution to meet your own interest and to serve your own interest, that is a constitutional coup. As a president, when you go become a president and you swear to protect the constitution, in there is also the term limits, which you're supposed to respect. And our leaders, a lot of them don't really care. Like this one now, Guinea. And Guinea has been relatively a peaceful country until now, when President Alpha Conde decided that he wants to mutilate the constitution there in Guinea. And now I've seen here the International Organization of La Francophonie, that governs the French-speaking countries in Africa, and came 6 days before elections. They gave a warning to Guinea. And this organization of La Francophonie, or whatever this is, I wonder where they have been. Because when you look at the problems, the countries who have been plunged in a lot of problems in Africa, when you look at a country like Cameroon and the issue of the Anglophones, when you look at the country like Central African Republic, you look at the Democratic Republic of Congo, you look at other countries that are really experiencing a lot of the insecurities. A good number of them are from the French-speaking African nations. I've not heard them come out and speak strongly about even some atrocity. I would think by now they would have, pointed out Mr. Paul Biya to what he's doing there to the Anglophones. I'm sure by now they're supposed to have pointed out and other things that are happening in the Francophone countries that are not good, the human rights abuse, the poor governance. So now they come up here 6 days before elections and now condemned by the opposition as a ploy by President Alpha Conde to stay in office. And so now the OIF said that the register, the Guinea register for voters included nearly 2.49 million what they call problematic names. 2.49 million problematic names, including duplicate names, people who were too young to vote, or individuals who were dead. Of these 2.4 million, 98% of the 2.4 million people who have problematic names, 98% of these names do not have documents to enable their identification. And the OIF also noted that the Francophone equivalent, who is there, the Francophone equivalent to Commonwealth, said, which meaning what? The headquarters is in France, right? Because Commonwealth, British, right? Said the problems was such that it found it difficult to carry out its role of providing support to the electoral process. It urged the government to avoid further deaths and prevent any risk of escalation. And now, of course, a country with a long tradition of political turmoil, Guinea is to vote on Sunday in a referendum and legislative elections. I don't know which country does this. Mr. Alpha Conde wants to change the constitution, which is something that is quite significant. But he decides what he's going to do because parliamentary elections were also scheduled to be happening on Sunday. He said, okay, we shall vote for the parliamentary elections for our leaders. At the same time, we shall go vote for a referendum. That is a recipe for chaos. That is a recipe for making a country go to a civil war. You cannot conduct an exercise very important like a referendum, changing the constitution, because essentially that is what a referendum is all about. It's changing very key components of the constitution of the country, and you want to mix it up with the parliamentary elections. I do not understand from which book Mr. Conde has been reading from. And remember, earlier in the year he said that he will be introducing very significant changes in the constitution, and when he was asked, does this have to do with the term limits, removing the term limits of the presidency, he did not answer to that. And so we see now that forms a part of the basis of why the people of Guinea will be subjected to a referendum. And now the referendum will be on changes to the constitution, which the opposition say is a bit by Conde, who is 81 years old. Can you go back? Can you go home already? To restart his time in office, restart. Mister, you already served a good 10 years. You want to restart your term in office and stay in power beyond the 2 terms that are provided for by the Kenyan, constitution. Now, Guinea has suffered a series of unrest over the plans for the constitution reform. At least 30 people and 30 people have died, and fresh clashes keeps breaking out in Guinea, and there have been a lot of protests, and the latest one happened on Saturday. Jailed under previous hardline regimes, Mr. Conde became Guinea's first democratically elected president in 2010. He was returned to office by voters in 2015 for his second and final 5-year term under the current constitution, but critics say he has become authoritarian. It's very interesting that Mr. Conde also in his previous life was jailed by hardline regimes, and what is very interesting and really that Mr. Conde was the first democratically elected president of Guinea. That happened in 2010. He already have gone to the history of that. The history books of Guinea as the president who was democratically elected in Guinea. So he decides, I want to tarnish all of that. I just want to throw that all to the window. And what we're going to do now, our democracy does not matter. The rule of law does not matter. I'm just going to perhaps become like my predecessors, because he suffered really during the previous regimes, and he becomes the president, and now look what he's doing, and it's not right, which is just the irony of it all. And so, being the first democratically elected president in that country, I think he's just poured water in all the gains that Guinea has made democratically, and has taken the country many steps back. And I don't think Guineans are happy, and we've been seeing them holding a lot of rallies condemning this move by their president there. All right, I've seen one of our viewers here from Burkina Faso. I don't know where you are. Earlier on there, you wrote and you said you're watching us from Burkina Faso. Let me just read some of your comments here before we talk about Burkina Faso and Nigeria and Biafra. And let me just read a few. Let me see. Keep writing. And please let me know where you're watching us from. Yes, here you are. Arizona. Amandi Anaiza, you're saying, please, if you're watching from Burkina Faso, say hi. Oh, you're from Burkina Faso. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for joining us. And now a lot of things have been happening from Burkina Faso, and Burkinabes have been really suffering, especially from Boko Haram and the threat that comes with it and the insecurity that comes with it. And now today, from the news we had today, 4 people have been killed after an ambush, and 3 of them are police. And it's just every week we come here with the news from Burkina Faso about very unfortunate incidences that are happening there that are being meted upon them by this jihadist group, Boko Haram. I think that it's very sad, and our thoughts and prayers goes to these people. And then to that extent, we need the government of Burkina Faso to step up. And I think insecurity has become very of the thing of, it's like the thing now in the Sahel region there, and something needs to be done, and done very, very quickly. And Nigeria, I still blame you. Nigerian government, even before President Muhammadu Buhari, I still blame you because you let Boko Haram there thrive. You gave it a home and it grew, and now this has become a problem and a cancer for Africa, and they have spread the insecurity. And President Muhammadu Buhari, you have continued to be very reluctant in the manner in which you are dealing with Boko Haram, and so you have created an enabling environment, and all the rest of us have to suffer deaths in Burkina Faso, deaths in Mali, deaths in Niger, deaths in whatever that part of the world, because you have failed to do your job. You came into office when Boko Haram was not even that strong. And one of the promises you made is that you'll get rid of them 100 days after you become the president. Mr. Buhari, you have not done that. You've not lived to your promise. The honorable thing to do for any forward-thinking individual or leader in the world was just to leave office, I think, because the security of a country is very paramount. If you cannot guarantee your people that, I don't know what you're still doing in office. That would be the right thing to do. And I blame the leadership in that country for the spread of Boko Haram because they gave a very good breeding ground for Boko Haram, and Boko Haram now is a problem to all of us. I don't care. I know I'm in East Africa, but I know it's just a matter of time. We have Al-Shabaab that you're trying to contain here, but I know they are in communication with Boko Haram, and it's just a matter of time before this mayhem catches up with the rest of Africa. And so African leaders should join in hands, put pressure on Buhari. I see now. Look, as I was reading the news earlier, and the Inspector General of Police there in Nigeria, Mohammed Adamo, on Tuesday, was speaking to House of Representatives Committee on Police Affairs. And these are some of the problems. These are some of the excuses he was giving as to why it's very difficult to contain the security there in Nigeria. I'll continue talking about this because it matters. And innocent lives continue to get lost, and the government is not doing enough. Instead, every day we see here, and also The communications person in the office of President Buhari, remember a few weeks ago, was it about 3 weeks ago, came out and said Nigerians should be thanking God that Buhari is the president right now, and that they should be thanking God that the security of the country has improved. And Nigeria now, especially northern Nigeria, is very heaven-like compared to the day where President Jonathan Goodluck was the president, when it was very hellish. So now it is heaven. So you guys live in heaven, but you don't want to enjoy the heaven that President Buhari has created for you. That was a person from his communications office of President Buhari's, and I was shocked because I wondered how out of touch can just a government be, period. And I can't. Dominic Nwandu, you're saying he's blaming Libya for this mishap. No. Boko Haram existed even before Libya. Even before the uprising in Libya that started in 2011. Boko Haram was still there. Not as loud, but they were still there. Boko Haram was still there. Let's just get the facts straight. Please, President Buhari, let's just get the facts straight. And before you even came to power, you knew Boko Haram was there and was a threat to the security of Nigeria. That is why you made the promise of getting rid of this group 100 days into your presidency. What have you done? What have you done? You went into deep slumber, and now Africans are being slaughtered in parts of Africa, in Nigeria itself, and in other countries. We have to talk about it, and we have to hold you responsible. Chimex Syriacas, oh, you have a name there. That is a mouthful. You're saying Nigerian government terrorists, they recruited Boko Haram into the system. Yes, I talked about this bill. I'll not talk about it today. That one of the senators there, presented to the Senate. And I think it has gone through the first part, the first reading, and it said that the government should recruit into the Nigerian army, some Boko Haram terrorist repentant. I don't know if it's a very good move there. And so now this is what the Inspector General of Police, Mr. Mohammed Adamu, said on Tuesday. He said, apart from the inadequate personnel, that is why they want to recruit Boko Haram repentance, by the way, because of the inadequate personnel, as if there are no people there in Nigeria who are qualified or who can be trained to really take up the helms of security in that country. The Nigerian police force needed no fewer than 1,000 armored personnel carriers. So they need 1,000 more personnel carriers. And what, again, the police needs is around 250,000 assault rifles with corresponding ammunition. All right. When I hear that, I just count the number of dead people. Adamu, who also disclosed this at a public hearing organized, of course, by the House of Representatives Committee on Police Affairs, said, so this meeting was tagged repositioning the Nigerian police for an enhanced service delivery. Said the country needed another, guess what, 2 million tear gas canisters and smoke grenades. I don't know if I should laugh at this or just feel sad for the people who are hoping that the government will get a hold of the security situation in the country. 2 billion tear gas that is supposed to smoke Boko Haram from its hiding, I guess. And that's a lot of tear gas. There are 2 million gas canisters and smoke grenades. How is this going to enhance security in Nigeria? Please help me understand. Or maybe I just don't get anything about security. And also other equipment. The IG said the force required include 200,000 riot gunners and smoke pistols, and also 1,000 tracking devices, and 774 operational drones, among others. He also lamented that poor remuneration scared best and suitable applicants away from the police. So in other words, what you are admitting there, Mr. Inspector General of Police Mohammed Adamu of Nigeria, what you're saying there is what you have in the Nigerian forces, the security forces there, are not the best the country can offer, because the good applicants, cannot come and work for the amount the government pays. So that is a very downing, admission there by a whole inspector of police. He's saying the poor remuneration of the police forces there, security forces there, is the reason why suitable applicants shy away from working in the forces, meaning what Nigerians you have now. So here's the problem. I think now we've come to the root of the problem. Why, the insecurity in Nigeria, and why the institutions responsible for this handle this matter in a way that it's just not okay. This is because what you have there is non-suitable applicants. What you have there are people who don't even care that they have a country to protect and to secure. What you have there are people who are not necessarily qualified, because the ones that are qualified, because the ones that are passionate for the job, because the ones that are suitable for the job, the amount of money that they're being paid is not very attractive to them. So they've kept away. So now, if you're wondering why Nigeria is unsafe, if you're wondering why the insecurity in Nigeria is the way it is, that is because what you have there is not the suitable applicants, because according to the Inspector General of Police, the suitable applicants don't care for this job because of how they're being paid. That says a lot. How are you inspiring confidence to the citizen there in Nigeria? How are you, by making such a statement, telling them, but don't worry, you're fine and we have your security guaranteed? No wonder the runaway insecurity in Nigeria, because you have people who are not inspired at all. You have people who don't really care about the security. After all, I'm just here to get a salary, or however much that is. I am here, I don't care much, because I'm not even suitable for this job anyways. So that explains the insecurity in Nigeria. And 2 million tear gas canisters and smoke grenades. What are these for? What are these for? Will that help in getting solutions for the security in Nigeria? Will that help the police in containing security in Nigeria? I just don't know. And of course, the other things that they asked there. Now, the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, Mr. Nnamdi Kanu, has called on the United States Department of State and the international community to rise up and stop atrocities against non-Muslims in Nigeria. According to the Niger News reports, the IPOB leader made this call on Twitter in reaction to the continued detention of Leah Sharibu by a terrorist group, that is Boko Haram, since she has been abducted, I think 2 years now. Which happened, I think, in February 19th, 2018, when 110 girls between the ages of 11 and 19 were kidnapped by Boko Haram from a school there in Dabchi location in Balabun, Yunusari local government area of Yobe State in the northern part of Nigeria. While other schoolgirls were released, Leah Sharibu, a Christian schoolgirl aged 14 then, still remained captured and is the only remaining Dabichi schoolgirl still held hostage. And so what Mr. Nnamdi Kanu here is saying, but of course Boko Haram, they've said that their main aim, they're fighting the Christians. I think they've made that very, very clear. Of course, a lot of their targeted indiscriminative attacks sometimes happen, and even the non-Christians get hurt, but that is just, they've come out very clear, because they're against they think if you're not a Muslim, you're an infidel. That is why it is an extremist group, because a normal Muslim wouldn't care what religion you are in. They will respect that the same way Christians respect the Islam religion, we respect Hindu religion, we respect the other religions. We don't have a problem. You pray however you want to pray. It's fine. It's fine. And any normal Islam or Muslim, that is usually that is where they come from. They'll go pray to Allah. Whatever you choose to pray to, whatever you choose to believe, it's none of their business. That is what a normal worshipper from any religion does. But Boko Haram is an extremist group. So it doesn't think the way a normal Islam would think. They don't look at the world the normal and normal Islam would. And so they've waged war against Christians. They've made it very, very clear because they think Christians, infidels, and even moderate Muslims, they feel they're not really in line with what they believe, the extreme views that they believe about religion. And so they've made it very clear. So I'm not surprised by them keeping this girl after abducting a whole school of girls. So many abductions have happened that have been carried out by Boko Haram, and that's why I'm really upset by the Nigerian government that it is now that they are having these sittings in parliament. It is now that they're finding need to be discussing this, and yet this has been happening over time. We've seen mass, kidnappings in schools. We've seen a whole part of the country being rendered paralyzed, and there's no free movement. Service delivery has been affected because Boko Haram is very active in this areas, and the government has been very, very quiet. The government has been very reluctant and has been very passive in the manner in which it has been dealing with security from this area. And so it's just now they act like they just woke up and Nigeria is chaotic and now they want to do something. And you come here and you see the Inspector General of Police, all he wants is about 2 million canisters of tear gas while the country is being ran by an extremist group. Come on now, these people can do better. And so I Mr. Buhari, come on now, you're letting down your people. So Nnamdi Kanu has come out and he's made it very clear that the reason why Leah is still in custody of Boko Haram. There's no telling whether she's still alive or not. Or is she the girl that refused to denounce her faith? I think she could be the girl who refused to change her faith, and so she's still being held. There's no telling if she's still alive or not. And so I think Nnamdi Kanu there has a point, because Boko Haram itself has come out and say we are targeting, among other things, moderate Muslims, but also we are gunning for the blood of non-Muslims altogether. So this is an ideological war that must be fought, and these extremist ideas must be defeated. Unfortunately, I don't think that President Buhari is the man for the job. Thank you so much for your time. Let's meet here at around 3 p.m. East African time, where I shall be coming back with another different show altogether. It has been a pleasure engaging with you this afternoon. Night, Michael Losowa, you're saying it's really sad to see all the time those Boko Haram are kidnapping and killing, especially did you say Christmas? And the government is not doing enough to stop that. I think you meant Christians. And Samuel Chaga, you're saying good morning, Miriam. It is afternoon here, just a few minutes past 1 p.m. But good morning where you're watching me from. I suppose it is still morning. And let me say that Africans always copy the worst in religions. I tell you. They just decided, you know what, Al Qaeda is the way to go, and look at us now. Okay, you're saying, may God bless Biafrans, the IPOB, for all good works. All right. And Wati Ima, you're saying, God bless Punchline Africa. Thank you so much. Your prayers really do go a long way, and we appreciate. And Dominique Nod, you're saying, go on, say that he is happy Ojukwu died, okay, I think unbelievable. I don't understand that English is not very straightforward there. But thank you for writing, Dominique Nwandu. Prince Kingsley Okebe, you're saying Buhari is their mentor, and that's why his government is free and recruiting Boko Haram members into our military with a fantastic label, repentance. But we are not surprised of it all, because they are once called him as their mediator. Oh, really? Okay, and it is the same thing that the Malian president wants to do. I was talking about it here, Mr. Keita Boubacar there. He wants to start negotiations with the jihadist group, the Boko Haram version in that country. It is Boko Haram still in Mali, and he wants to bring them to the table and discuss what? What are you discussing? Let me tell you, in this country, here in Kenya, there's a time where there are some extremist groups that were trying to spring up in some parts of the country. I cannot explain to you the kind of heavy-handedness that the government came down to these people. We have not heard that nonsense again. The minute the intelligence was gathered, the government dealt with them accordingly. If the presidency of Buhari or the latter or the previous had really dealt with the menace of Boko Haram from the start, we could not be seeing what is happening there today. And all right, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. So let's meet later. My name is Miriam Ngutu. It has been a pleasure.
Peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.